Imagine a man who took on one of the most powerful European armies of his time and won. Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia was a warrior, strategist, and national hero who stood up to the colonial powers in the 19th century and came out on top. Now, Ethiopia, as you probably know, is one of the oldest nations in the world, and Menelik II wasn't just a leader. He was the man who fought off the Italians and protected his country's independence when everyone else was being carved up by European powers. So subscribe and let's dive in. Menelik II was born in 1844 in the province of Shua, which was part of the Ethiopian Empire. His birth name? Sultan Amha. But it wasn't long before he'd become known as Menelik, a name that would strike fear into the hearts of invaders. His early life was anything but smooth. He was a prince, yes, but at a young age, Menelik was caught in the turbulent politics of the Ethiopian Empire. His father, King Haile Melekot, was a regional leader, and Menelik was taken hostage by the emperor at the time, Tawadros II, to ensure loyalty. But instead of breaking his spirit, this captivity gave Menelik the chance to observe and learn. He became wise in the ways of court politics and military strategy, and when the time came, he was ready to take charge. Fast forward to the late 1800s. Menelik had grown into a strong leader, and when the time came, he took control of his own region, Shua, and declared himself Emperor of Shua. But this wasn't just about local control. He had bigger ambitions for Ethiopia. Menelik wasn't content with just ruling one province. He had his eyes on the throne of all Ethiopia. So, what did he do? He played it smart. He built alliances, secured his position, and eventually, in 1889, he became the emperor of all Ethiopia after a series of successful political moves. Now, the stage was set for a showdown with the European powers who had already begun carving up Africa. Now, let's set the scene. It's the late 1800s, and European powers are in the midst of the scramble for Africa, basically a massive land grab where almost every European country was trying to claim a piece of the African continent. Italy, newly unified as a kingdom, wasn't one of the major colonial powers yet, and they were hungry for a victory. So, in 1889, they set their sights on Ethiopia, a country that was one of the few in Africa to maintain its independence. But here's the thing. Menelik wasn't going to just sit there and wait for the Italians to walk all over him. Oh no, he wasn't going to let some foreign empire dictate his future. He had a plan, and he was about to show the world what it meant to stand up to imperialism. In 1895, the Italians officially declared war on Ethiopia, hoping to annex it as part of their empire. They figured Menelik would just submit. After all, Ethiopia didn't have the same military might as European nations, right? Wrong. Menelik had one thing the Italians didn't expect: a huge army of loyal soldiers. He quickly gathered a force of over 100,000 soldiers, ready to defend their homeland. And he had a secret weapon, modern weapons that he'd secretly acquired from Russia and France. While the Italians thought they were dealing with a backwards country, they were about to face one of the most formidable armies in Africa. Now, let's talk about the battle itself. The Battle of Adwa in 1896, one of the most significant clashes between African and European forces. The Italians, led by General Oreste Baratieri, had about 20,000 soldiers, and they assumed it would be a quick win. Spoiler alert, it was anything but that. Menelik's forces were well coordinated and ready for action. The Italians, by contrast, underestimated the terrain, overextended their supply lines, and didn't anticipate the fierce resistance they'd face. The battle itself was a total disaster for the Italians. Over 7,000 Italian soldiers were killed, and the rest were forced to retreat. Ethiopia had won. Against the odds, this victory at Adwa sent shockwaves around the world. Ethiopia had just defeated a European power, and this wasn't some random skirmish. This was a major victory for African independence, and Menelik became a symbol of resistance to colonialism. He had just done what seemed impossible. Menelik's triumph legitimized Ethiopia's independence for good. He didn't just protect his country, he secured its place on the global stage. In fact, Ethiopia was the only African nation to retain its independence during the scramble for Africa, and that was in no small part because of Menelik's leadership. But his legacy wasn't just about military victories. Under Menelik's reign, Ethiopia saw modernization efforts, new roads, a national currency, and improvements in the country's infrastructure. He was also a unifier, bringing together various ethnic groups within Ethiopia and making it a stronger, more centralized empire. Menelik's later years were marked by health problems. In fact, he suffered a stroke in 1909, and though he technically remained emperor, his power began to wane. His successor, Emperor Isuv, would face the challenges of leading Ethiopia in a rapidly changing world. But Menelik II's victory at Adwa was a milestone in history that is still celebrated today. His ability to protect Ethiopia's sovereignty ensured that it would remain free from colonization, and his resilience inspired countless independence movements across Africa. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, what do you think of Menelik II's incredible victory? Have a good one, young historians.